and then feel sorry for them because I was a crack dealer with a heart of gold.
You was 18. You got a good rider, a good woman with you by your side. You don't cheat on her.
Walmart think they done me. They think they done paying me.
Oh yeah, but they're...
Yeah, but if I saw acting crazy and...
For over 2 decades, Tracy Morgan has been more than just a comedian. He's been a live wire on the American stage. A Saturday night live beast, the kind of first-rate talent that the entertainment industry only produces once. But then, something no one dared to think about happened. The years of being ridiculed for her non-Hollywood standard appearance. Litigation erupted. The waves of depression are more dangerous than the industry's politics itself. And then, there was the horrific accident that made the doctor say bluntly, "Prepare for the worst." Her closest friends admit, Tracy isn't herself anymore. What brought down a comedic beast into that cruel dead end? Who is the person behind the mask who fooled the whole world into thinking he's okay? And why is everything related to Tracy Morgan shrouded in a silence as heavy as lead? The final truth revealed might bring you to tears. 1. From drug dealer to stand-up comedian. Tracy Jamal Morgan was born on November 10, 1968 in Brooklyn, amidst the public housing projects of Bedford-Stuyvesant, where the sounds of car horns, arguments, and police chases were more familiar than the morning birdsong. Your father, James Morgan Jr., a veteran returning from the Vietnam War, named you Tracy to honor a fallen comrade. Despite carrying many war wounds, James was still the first person to ignite the flame of comedy in Tracy's soul. He had an innate sense of humor, the kind of intelligent and sharp wit like Richard Pryor, and Tracy always vividly remembered his first comedic moment when he was just 4 years old, sitting on his father's lap and hearing people laugh at some impromptu remark. He said, "I was too young to understand why they were laughing, but that feeling made me want to try again and again and again." For Tracy, the smiles of others were the first gift he learned how to give. And as he got a little older, he realized something that makes every teenager's eyes light up. When you're funny, you attract girls. In a place as poor and violent as Brooklyn, humor is both a way to survive and a way for Tracy to feel valuable in the simplest sense. But that light couldn't save the person who passed it on to him. Her father left the family when Tracy was only 6 years old, leaving a void too large for such a young child. By her senior year of high school, Tracy received a second blow when she discovered her father was HIV positive due to injecting drugs. A soldier who survived 1,000 bloody battlefields, yet succumbed to the temptation of the very street he once called home. For Tracy, it was a truth too cruel for a teenager to accept. Contrary to the image of her father, who was once imposing in his military uniform, Tracy was a shy, quiet child in school, always a target for bullies. Despite this, he is still a filial son, trying to hide his pain so as not to worry his mother. When her father collapsed from illness, Tracy made a decision no child should have to make. Dropping out of school with only 4 credits left to graduate, just to care for the man who was slowly fading before her eyes. But that effort still couldn't overcome the illness. Her father passed away at the age of 38, leaving Tracy fatherless. Poverty, which was already present in the house, has now become a real shadow that covers the entire family. They lived on welfare, and meals became so scarce that Tracy realized if he didn't do something, this family would become a tombstone. To support his mother and siblings, he was forced to sell crack for a short time. But that didn't make things better. It just made Tracy feel like he was becoming the very thing he hated most. Drugs took his father from his life, but now he stands on the brink of becoming a seller of them himself. It haunted him, even after he became famous. Years later, even standing on the stages of 30 Rock or SNL, he could close his eyes and still remember that feeling of fear and embarrassment. But that wasn't the end of the suffering. My best friend, the only one who advised me to change my ways and pursue an artistic path. "Hey Tracy, you should do stand-up comedy." It was the first time someone pointed directly to the future and told him he could get off the streets. A week later, that person was murdered. Without prior notice, no goodbye. Tracy described it as the Vietnam War of my life. From then on, every step Tracy took was accompanied by a pang of regret. He lived, but his friend did not. He was successful, but the person who deserved to witness it was already lying deep beneath the cold earth. Tracy always wondered, why am I still alive to pursue my dreams? while the person who brought those dreams to me isn't. After that death, Tracy started making money by doing street comedy. That was the real beginning of his stand-up comedy career, the peak of his success. But Tracy didn't know that the laughter that had once saved him in those dark days would become the very weapon Hollywood would use to wear him down, bit by bit, just a few years later. 2. The journey of stepping onto the stage for the first time. The profession of stand-up comedy may seem easy, but Tracy Morgan always says it's a place where you have to stand alone in front of an entire room, ready to turn their backs if a joke doesn't hit the mark. No co-stars. No one spoke up. There's only one microphone, and the reaction is so intense it could knock you off the stage in seconds. If the joke doesn't resonate with the audience's taste, they'll be direct by leaving booing or falling silent, to the point where you can clearly hear your own heart skip a beat. Or worse, they'll throw things at your face. Tracy once asked to perform without pay. There were nights when I had to pay just to stand on stage for 5 minutes. That's how he lives with his profession. But the stage is never an easy place for a black person with nothing but talent. The early days of auditioning were a cold shower he'll never forget. Tracy entered the room, and after just a few seconds of looking at him, the answer was almost always the same. Not a good fit. It's not because he didn't have time to act badly, but because they never gave him a chance to perform. To them, Tracy was just a black guy from Brooklyn too ugly to look at. He once asked for a trial performance slot, and just as he began to tell the story of his childhood, the club owner cut him off with a cold remark. "The audience here won't like this kind of thing." That moment felt like being gagged. Tracy stood there, then asked again, "If so, whose story do they want to hear? Should I tell a life that isn't mine?" No one answered. But that silence said it all. To be on stage, he had to step out without bringing his culture with him. And despite being constantly turned away, Tracy performed anywhere she could, small bars, old gyms. But it is precisely in those places that one sees what the big stage deliberately overlooks. Martin Lawrence saw the sharpness in every one of Tracy's jokes, saw his outstanding talent. Martin pulled him into the Martin series, bringing the name Tracy Morgan to national screens for the first time, with a part of his life being broadcast without interruption. But when the door opened, Tracy found herself in another room, with countless invisible boundaries. As a black artist in the comedy industry, he constantly hears things like, "This joke needs to be less urban. Don't be too street. Don't just say whatever comes to mind." They want you to appear on television, but in a version that's safe enough, not to upset primetime viewers. And as Tracy became more famous, those requests piled up like an encyclopedia. Go crazier than yesterday. The audience likes that. But they didn't understand that Tracy's madness came from his wounds, from his memories, from his days surviving on the streets. When you have to perform what others want instead of what comes from within yourself, you will gradually feel like you are disappearing right on stage. There were nights when Tracy stood on the SNL set. The lights were blinding, and the audience roared with laughter just at the sight of him. But he found it fake. You once said, "When you stand alone under the spotlight, if you don't make them laugh, you'll find yourself suffocatingly lonely." He decided to change everything. If he couldn't maintain his essence, he'd be no different from a candy clown. And despite his fame, Morgan once said that being famous didn't change his nature, and he always kept his heart as simple as in the old days when no one knew him. But like a curse on young, short-lived artists, one night on the highway, the limousine carrying him was crushed in the dark. 3. The death train. A serious traffic accident occurred to Tracy Morgan on July 6, 2014 on the New Jersey Turnpike, while he and a group of friends were returning from a performance in Delaware. The limousine transporting Morgan was a Walmart truck. Speeding from behind the driver was past his working hours. His eyes were exhausted. One wrong moment, 1 second of inattention, and the next thing that echoed was only the sound of crushed metal. The limo was tossed around like a toy. Everything happened in a few seconds, but the consequences lasted for years. James McNair died on the spot. No cries for help, no chance for a final word. The man who stood by Tracy from their humble beginnings to the blossoming of her fame. The one who said, "You were born to do this, don't give up," left the world in a collision no one was prepared for. Tracy is still alive, but almost every part of her body is damaged. Broken bones, crushed legs, bleeding in the brain. He was unconscious. Breathing with a machine, his body sprawled out amidst the sound of ambulance sirens and the flashing red and blue lights on the chaotic road. News of the accident spread quickly through the night like a cold wind. The entire United States woke up with the fear that Tracy Morgan, the man they once laughed with, might never get up again. In the hospital, the space is stark white. The doctors looked at the CT scan results, and no one spoke for several seconds. When they spoke, their words were like a knife. He may never be able to stand on stage again. It's not a prediction. It's not a threat. It's just a harsh reality. But for Tracy, the stage wasn't work. It's where he found his voice, where he survived a violent childhood, where he proved that life couldn't crush him like it had crushed his father. Hearing that sentence, even the Tracy wasn't conscious at the time, felt like his life had been broken a second time. When Tracy opened her eyes, everything blurred into a white haze, and the lights were blinding. I can't feel my legs. I can't remember the moment of the accident. I don't know why my body feels as heavy as lead. But the first thing he asked wasn't about himself. His voice was distorted and weak, but clear enough to make the whole room freeze. Where's my friend? Why am I still alive and he's not? That question seemed to pull everyone in the room into the truth. The deepest wounds are not on the body. It lies in the survivor's guilt. That moment struck straight into the memory that Tracy had tried to bury for years. The memory of his best friend in Brooklyn, who first told him he should do stand-up comedy, who was murdered just a week after saying that. The accident with James McNair was like a cruel, fated loop. Tracy once lost the person who believed in her the most, and now he's lost another person. It felt as if God was taking away each of his companions, as if every step he took toward the light brought with it a heavier, longer shadow. He survived again, but the person standing next to him didn't. That crushed him in a way no doctor could treat. In the days following the accident, the media swarmed with descriptions of the horror of the crash of the crushed limo and of Tracy's critical condition. But what they didn't see was how he tried to lift his hand, but couldn't. The way he silently burst into tears. When he heard the news of James's death, even the no tears flowed, because the painkillers had numbed everything. The way he's afraid of bright light because it reminds him of truck headlights speeding straight toward them. And the cruelest thing, he had to learn to walk again from scratch. A comedian who once rocked the stage now has to learn every small step like a child. It hurts every time I stand up. Every time I take a step, I tremble. Every time I look down at my feet, I see a part of my old life that's been lost. The entire United States calls his survival a miracle. But for Tracy, it didn't feel like magic. It's like a painful reminder you're still here to carry the burden of those who are gone. He lived to tell the story they couldn't tell. He smiles to represent all those who used to laugh with him in the past. And the tragedy of that night wasn't just that Tracy almost died. It's about you having to keep living. You have to stand up. I have to go back to a world where laughter rings out loudly, but no one sees my pain. 4. The journey of starting everything from scratch. They call Tracy Morgan's return a miracle. But if you get close enough, you'll see that miracle is built on a years-long nightmare. A journey that even the strongest people didn't know if they could survive. After the accident that made the whole of America think he would be gone forever, Tracy had to relearn everything from scratch, like a 3-year-old child. Feet accustomed to the stage had to relearn on the wooden beam. In the physical therapy room, each step a wave of pain that surged from the soles of the feet to the crown of the head. The nurse had to support him like a beginner, learning to walk, while Tracy just looked down at the floor, breathing heavily, wondering why the body that had once helped him stand before millions of spectators was now betraying him like this. The applause of old didn't help now. All he had was the sound of bones creaking every time he tried to lift his leg a few more centimeters. The brain injury made his memory flicker like a flickering light. There were days when Tracy woke up and thought he was backstage at SNL in 1998. There were days when he saw his daughter, and it took him a few seconds to recognize that familiar face. He once recounted that there were moments when he felt suspended between wakefulness and a daze, unsure of what was real and what were distorted memories. For a comedian, memory is their lifeblood. Tracy lost his rhythm, and with it, he lost his sense of control over his own life. Just hearing the sound of brakes outside the window, his whole body froze. Every time the engine noise echoed from behind, he flinched as if he had just heard the sound of the limousine being crushed that night. The doctor called it PTSD, but for Tracy, it was a shock that pulled him back to the exact moment he lost his best friend and almost lost himself. Survivor's guilt gnawed at him from within. He survived. His friend sitting next to him didn't. The person died on the spot while Tracy was airlifted to the hospital. That truth made him unable to look in the mirror without asking himself, why me? He stood up, learned to walk, learned to speak, but his mind was still stuck on that question. And when he couldn't find the answer, he blamed himself. It was a smoldering feeling, like a fire burning under ashes, unseen by anyone, but it was hollowing him out, bit by bit. The more successful Tracy became in his recovery, the more guilty he felt, as if each step forward was a step further away from his lost friend. Your marriage didn't escape that storm either. The partner tries to stay, but not everyone has the strength to live alongside someone who is broken, both physically and mentally. There were days when Tracy would burst into tears during dinner because of a fleeting memory. There were nights he would sit straight up gasping and trembling, and his wife wouldn't know what to do except put her hand on his shoulder and wait for the panic attack to pass. But Tracy's fear didn't go away. It just lurks in the shadows and returns whenever he's at his weakest. When someone spends their entire life recovering, they no longer have the strength to hold on to their marriage. And when Tracy looked back, things had already cracked before he even understood what was happening. Meanwhile, the media knows how to create a more palatable story. Walmart pays tens of millions to Tracy Morgan. They talked about the numbers. They talked about the lawsuit. They talk about money as if it can replace your legs, replace your memory, replace the person who died right next to you. That headline spread faster than any health update, and suddenly, Tracy was transformed into a disaster profiteer. The audience turned their backs, unaware that he had to spend months learning how to hold a spoon. They don't know that he can't even remember the path from the hospital room to the elevator. They didn't know about the nights Tracy lay awake with the lights on, eyes wide open because just tearing away a piece of the darkness would bring the nightmare back to consume him. For many years, Tracy didn't sleep through a single night. I'm afraid to close my eyes, afraid to go back inside that crushed car. He was afraid to hear the sound of metal clashing again and the voice of his friend calling his name before falling silent. The world saw Tracy get up, return to the stage, and joke around just like old times. But the reality is that every step he takes into the spotlight is paid for, with long sleepless nights and fragmented memories he has to piece back together. And that's when people finally understood. Tracy's laughter was something he had to trade for a pain no one wanted to bear. Fame doesn't heal him. It just covers up the wound so the audience can't see it. But Tracy still feels it every day. 5. The artist's comeback. Hollywood welcomed Tracy Morgan back after the accident that almost took his life. But that embrace was always colder than people imagined. People called his return a miracle, a gift from God, and proof that Tracy's laughter was stronger than death. But when the stage lights came on again, Tracy understood better than anyone. Hollywood only needed him as long as he was crazy enough to make them laugh. The curtain call, beautifully staged for the public, has never reflected the truth behind the scenes. A person who once collapsed on the highway, who was once crushed by steel and concrete, cannot be restored to wholeness simply by a new filming schedule. Your brain still bears the scars of the collision, leaving emotional gaps that you can't control. Some days he laughs with everyone. Other days he remains silent for hours because he doesn't know what name to give the feelings he's carrying. It was the people who worked closest to him who said it directly. Tracy is no longer the Tracy he used to be. No more thoughtless recklessness. No longer the madness he once brought to the stage like a shield. Now every laugh has to go through a bottle of painkillers and a memory spasm. His body is sounding the alarm every day. The nosebleeds in the middle of the stadium, the sudden vomiting, the ambulance rides that people tried to keep secret, all show that the after effects of the accident have not disappeared. Diabetes still clings to him like an old shadow from his youth, forcing him to live a life of acting, checking his blood sugar, laughing, and testing whether he still has feeling in his feet. But the public doesn't know those things. They only saw a Tracy who was still standing still, smiling, still cracking jokes that were unsuitable for anyone but perfect for him. The truth is, every time he stood under those lights, only he knew what he had to sacrifice to make that laughter ring out. The Last OG is a milestone that helped Tracy return to television after over a year of rehabilitation. The role was written specifically for him based on his own real life, and the audience loved it. It gave them the feeling that Tracy was still the same familiar pure madness. But within the industry, no one can forget the old wounds. It wasn't an accident, but the time when he faced controversies, setbacks, and severe bouts of depression. People always bring up the past to be wary of the future. And Tracy knows that. I could feel the eyes of the people behind the camera eyes that were always waiting to see if I would cross the line again, if I would lose my balance again. Hollywood never truly forgives. It's only temporarily silent while you're still useful. During the recording, Tracy looked at the audience and felt like she was looking through a frosted glass. Laughter rang out, but didn't touch him. He knows he's wearing a mask that everyone is trying to keep intact like a commercial product, Tracy Morgan, the wild one. But the man standing in that body was no longer the one who once made the entire SNL studio erupt with a joke, or the one who stood in the middle of Harlem Street and unleashed laughter that dispelled despair. The accident took away the wildest part of him. The brain damage took away the most innocent part of him. And time took away the most friendly part of him as those who once stood by him gradually drifted away. But the audience doesn't know that part. They only saw Tracy return and thought he had completely recovered. And Tracy accepts that. He always says, "They only remember me when I make them laugh." The saying isn't about confidence, but a simple, even brutal truth in this industry. Laughter is the only passport. No one remembers the nights he spent in the hospital room, unable to even remember himself. No one knows the mornings he wakes up unsure of who he's living for. And no one needs to know. They just need to see you laugh again the way they used to. And that is the soft tragedy of a comedian. He is always the one who brightens the room, but he himself lives in its darkest corner. Tracy brought laughter back to the world after nearly dying, but that world never gave him peace in return. In the spotlight, he's still the Tracy Morgan the audience loves. But in those moments when the lights went out, there was only one man left trying to keep himself from breaking down again. 6. The Clown's Tears. Tracy Morgan still stood on stage, still holding the microphone in the familiar posture of someone who had spent half his life making others laugh, but his eyes were no longer the eyes of the reckless Brooklyn kid he once was. There's something weary, deep, and quiet about it, like someone who has seen death close enough to know that every remaining moment is a bonus from fate. Every time he smiles, a very slight twitch appears at the corner of his eye, something that never happened before the accident. Just like your body still remembers the feeling of crushed metal, the screech of brakes in the dark night, and the final call of your companion, who never returned. He stood there looking down at the crowd, at the faces waiting for his next joke. And sometimes he looked like someone trying to convince himself that laughter was still worth continuing. There's one thing few people understand about Tracy. He never saw his comeback as a victory. For him, it was just the duty of someone who survived, while his best friend died from a sudden stab, and the colleague who died in the 2014 accident never had the chance to say a final apology. Tracy often repeats a line that few audience members notice: "I'm not coming back strong. I'm back because I still owe those who couldn't." The phrase sounds light at first, but it contains a lifetime of haunting memories. I'm not acting to prove anything to the world. He performs because it's the only way he knows how to keep those he's lost by his side, at least in every laugh that echoes down to the audience. In the Black community, Tracy Morgan is a rare example of a quiet form of resilience. It's not the superficial kind of strength, not glorious achievements, but the quiet perseverance of someone who has endured enough pain that they no longer need to prove anything. In him, people saw the image of old generation Black men born in poverty, raised in violence, growing up in deprivation, yet still standing tall, still moving forward, not for the colorful American dream, but because it was the only way to survive. Tracy never calls herself an icon. He just stood there, his body covered in scars, his voice sometimes trembling from the after effects, and recounted the stories of his life with a half-serious, half-playful tone. But it was that very simplicity that made him an icon for millions who once thought they had to flaunt their strength to be respected. For Tracy, his existence was an act of defiance. But when the lights dimmed and the applause faded into the air, Tracy Morgan's life returned to its starting point. A man sitting silently backstage looking in the mirror and seeing clearly what the audience would never see. He knows his laugh doesn't sound like the laughs of young comedians today. It's not sharp anymore, no longer free, no longer the death-defying recklessness of the old days. It's more compressed, deeper, and sometimes sounds like a sigh disguised as a punchline. No one blames you, but he blames himself. It's not because you didn't do well enough, but because you always think the friend who died back then should have been the one to see today. His joy always comes with that sadness. An emotional divide is never healed. And this is what longtime viewers sensed, even though no one said it out loud. Tracy Morgan made America laugh for 2 decades, but most of the time, he was just borrowing laughter to soothe his own wounds. Not wounds from accidents, not from illness, but the wounds of someone who has always had to pretend to be strong so that everyone would feel okay. Comedians are often seen as the funniest people in the room, but Tracy is proof that sometimes the person who makes the whole country laugh is also the loneliest person in that room. So the final question of this journey isn't for Tracy, but for ourselves. A nation that laughed for him, demanded laughter from him, and treated his pain as entertainment. Did it ever truly understand the price he had to pay? The truth is no one really knows. We only know that he survived, returned, tried to keep everything looking normal, and continued to stand on stage, even though his legs still occasionally trembled from memories that would never disappear. And so, the final question the video wants to leave us with doesn't need to be long to make the whole country laugh. How many tears must one sacrifice? When the screen fades to black, everyone will have their own answer. But whatever the answer, it starts with a simple truth Tracy Morgan paid more than anyone knew. Then,
all data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.